they brought in like floodlights, the little like the box stands that you would stand on, like
Yeah.
with the lights and shit inside it. They brought those. Like, where
Oh
can we put
fuck.
these? We're like, nowhere. Like, leave them in your car.
Yeah, in your trunk.
Like if you literally like, if your guitar player throws his guitar too high in the air, he's gonna hit a pipe. One two one two. Hello, Canada.
Sounds good. All right, you ready to do this thing?
Sure, let's go.
Sick. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. I'm sitting down with a hardcore vocalist, a posse jumper, Dev from Boise. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Hello. It's good to be back technically.
Yeah, technically speaking. So we did this podcast maybe a month or so ago, and unfortunately, I had some issues with the audio. So we're here for round two. Probably more well oiled than last time, but last time's conversation was definitely a good one. Can you give me a proper intro for the people that might not know what bands you're a part of and where you're based?
My name's Devin. I sing in Rejection Pact out of Boise, Idaho. That's the only band that I'm in, but weirdly, almost everyone in our band besides Nathan, our guitar player, are in 2 or 3 other bands.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember us talking, and this might be one of those podcasts where I'm constantly referring to a past recording, but we did talk about those, some of the other bands. The Boise scene as a whole is maybe a lot smaller, so some of those bands share members, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that we'll bring that up. But Dev, I'm just gonna crack this bev, and then we'll get into the conversation. I saw you were drinking something while we were trying to set this thing up.
I have a Monster Zero Red.
Nice.
It's very ultra red, very good.
Are you big on the Monster or the energy drinks overall?
Yes, yeah. Big fan.
Big fan.
I love caffeine. Usually for my work day, I work like 7 a.m. to like 5 p.m. In the morning, I'll either have a big cup of coffee or an energy drink, and usually around like 2, I'll have another cup of coffee, and then maybe one more around like 5 or 6 if I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I need that second cup, I guess. If Lumpy was here, that's what he'd be saying. Acquiring the second cup of the day, and it's really funny on how differently caffeine affects people. Like some people, like my wife, for example, like if she'll have anything of in the coffee realm around the afternoon, she'll be up till like 2 a.m, and I can have coffee at like 7 p.m. and be totally fine to go to bed at 11 o'clock. It's very strange.
Like, I'm fine without it. Like whenever we're on tour or just doing like show stuff, I won't drink any caffeine just for like singing purposes, whether or not, I know a lot of people that doesn't do anything to them, but I for some reason think it does for me, whether or not it even actually does. But I won't have any caffeine like during those times to where I'm fine. Like I don't really think I'm sleepy, but I think it's more of just like especially with work, like just a habit of like if I don't have it, I'll think that I'm really tired.
Right.
And it's just part of like the normal day-to-day routine.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that thinking. I've been in the studio with a band, working on a little project with them, and the vocalist, his name is Kyle. He was like, he cut out coffee completely before the recording process, and he's like, my vocals and my just everything in that system feels so much better for him. So I'm curious if anyone listening or watching is like, yeah, I've done that, or is curious about that.
I know caffeine is supposed to strain your vocal cords. And I mean, I think if you're like touring all the time or just playing shows constantly, you could probably build up a stamina anyway.
Right.
But being that we don't tour that much, I feel like they're not like that strong per se. But yeah, I mean, I've recorded stuff having drank a bunch of caffeine all day and it sounded okay, but I'm also like not playing a show the next day or the next day or the next day.
Right. Yeah, I've heard some very strange, like, call it studio, like, vocal remedies, whether it's like, oh, just get me anything that's going to just thicken up my vocal cords, like eating just greasy pizza or fast food or anything like that. But I've heard things on the latter side of that. So I think it's very dependent to the person because everyone's got a different situation.
I know I read Justin Bieber will eat a bunch of greasy food before he records vocals.
He would eat
So
a,
it like
a
coats his
bunch of what
throat.
kind of food?
Just greasy food, like you were
Oh,
saying,
okay.
like he would just want to like coat the hell out of his throat so it would just be thick, I guess.
And he's not, and just,
I don't like eating anything.
yeah, and he's not even recording like yelling vocals. He's like he's doing the pop hits, if anything.
Super auto-tuned and very fixed in the studio.
Right, 100%. So it's like I'm sure there's a thick double C filter in the studio, but we're getting off topic here. But I'm glad that we talked about caffeine and vocal recording in the first six or so minutes. Well, Dev, you're no stranger to I guess the process that I like to follow with this podcast. Context really matters to me, so tell me about how you got into just hardcore music overall. What were some of those early moments for finding out about this weird underground style of music, and what propelled you to stay on that path?
So, like a lot of people my age, I was really into nu metal and thought nu metal was great. And I loved how heavy it was and aggressive and weird. And back then, magazines, I feel like were a big thing. And I remember reading Revolver magazine, and in that back then you could have like hardcore and like metalcore bands be in there, and it wasn't necessarily quite as like weird to me, I guess. But I picked up one, and it was talking about like top 10 hardcore bands that you should be listening to right now. And it was definitely, most of those weren't hardcore bands per se. It was like Avenged Sevenfold and like From Mom to Ashes and stuff like that. But I think I want to say Glassjaw might have been listed in there. And at the time, I was listening to Glassjaw because they were on Roadrunner. And around then, I had probably heard like hardcore bands because I was also like in sophomore year of high school, I got really into the Punkorama comps and things like that. And they had like Madball and Agnostic Front and stuff on those comps as well. And even back then, those songs kind of stuck out more because it was like a good blending of metal and punk. To where between like reading like that specific Revolver issue and listening to those comps, I would just go to the store and blindly buy some of these CDs because you couldn't even downloading music back then like wasn't very easy, and they didn't have streaming or anything. So I started picking random CDs up like that. It stuck out immediately way more of like, okay, this is exactly what I would want to listen to. It's heavier, it's more aggressive. I liked that when I would like, I didn't know anyone that listened to that stuff at the time, to where it felt like a very like special, like I already felt like a weirdo. Right. So I'm like, oh, this is even weirder because no one fucking knows about this. Because I grew up in Alaska, which was not a hardcore mecca by any means.
Yeah, people weren't printing shirts with Alaska Hardcore and shipping them around the world at that point, or ever.
I remember when I first started ordering merch online, and like, I feel like back then too, you got a lot more like handwritten notes when you ordered merch. Right. And I would just get crazy notes from like, holy shit, we didn't know anyone in Alaska even like fucked with our band or like really knew about hardcore. That's crazy. So we sent you a bunch of free shit anyway. Like, that's so sick. I remember this band Make or Break from Florida. They were like a youth crew type band. I ordered a shirt from them, and I think they sent me a hoodie, 2 or 3 other shirts, and a bunch of stickers, and we're just like, "That's crazy, man. Thanks." Like it's probably cold up there, so we threw this hoodie in as well. And
Since you don't get summer, we should probably send some warmer layers your way. That's honestly super sick that they did that.
to where I don't know. I mean, just I guess I just got into hardcore, to go back to your question, through a combination of new metal and punk per se. And kind of once I like dove into that, I kind of dropped dropped new metal. I still liked punk, and now I like new metal again. But being at the age I was at, it was definitely like the almost like you're too cool to like jock what you listened to the year before.
Right.
So you kind of just like dropped it, and it's like, I don't, yeah, new metal sucks. But yeah, I kind of just went from there. Like, did bands in high school, started booking like local shows, promoting local shows, booking bands, like just stuff like that. Like, kind of just went from there. And then the cool thing at the time, no one, at least no, I'm sure there are people that liked hardcore in Anchorage that I just didn't really know. Like, there's a couple bands that like kind of teeter tottered like around playing hardcore, but me and my friends, as far as I know, were the first like hardcore kids per se that would like going to shows and like moshing and getting in fights at every local show because people wanted to like push mosh and we didn't want to do that, and like starting like quote unquote hardcore bands.
Yeah.
And like doing that whole thing. So that was kind of cool. Like once there was like a couple of us that were into it, started showing our friends, and then like kind of almost trying to convert our friends that were listening to like radio rock and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, this is actually way sicker. You should like fuck with this. This is cool.
Yeah,
But
that's always a big thing is like how can I pull people from these other local scenes like more metal or punk and just like, hey, come to these shows as well and hopefully you'll just fucks with it over, it being pounded into your face. And it does take time. It usually takes like kind of one or two call it like bands that kind of bridge the gap in between those genres, to make it actually like make sense for them.
yeah, like my first band, high school, was basically like Hopes Fall and like Poison the Well Worship. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I mean, looking back, it was actually kind of cool. Like, I'm not mad at the stuff we wrote because it was like, I guess, a little more like mature.
Sure.
I guess. But our buddies' band that we'd play all our shows with, they were just straight up like Unearth, As I Lay Dying Worship. So they were the band that like everyone was like, oh, this is sick. And they were the band that like brought in a lot of people that wouldn't otherwise, because they were a few years older than us also. So we brought in like our friends and like high school kids, and then they brought in a lot of like the bar crowd and just older folks. And then it was kind of weird though, because like we all like transitioned out of playing metalcore and we're wanting to play more like traditional hardcore, and then our band transformed into that style, and then we started other bands that sounded like that and that were even more punk, whereas they just kept leaning more and more and more into like ripping off As I Lay Dying and bringing in more and more people that like, in my opinion, didn't give a shit about hardcore, to where we kind of like eventually started veering off a couple years later of like, all right, well, you guys kind of must have like your scene and we have our scene, and we'd still play shows together, and it was like everything was fine, but like it had got to a point where it was almost big enough to where you had like sub scenes within the scene.
Yeah.
But luckily no one beefed. Like everyone got along. It was just like, that's cool. You guys can do your thing. We're not really about that.
Yeah, but that's kind of that's the move that some smaller scenes have to make is like, okay, all shows are like mixed shows because we don't have enough hardcore bands. We don't have enough just straight up metal bands. So over time, as more people come, then that separation of not just growth, like having just hardcore shows and a lot of scenes still do like mixed bill shit all the time.
I love mixed bill shows when the people that are in the different bands, even though they sound different, like everyone gets it.
Yeah.
Like we like one of our good buddies bands, they were like at the time it was like Set Your Goals, Worship, and it was sick. And then our other friends' band sounded like um kind of like Taking Back Sunday or Straight Light Run, just kind of stuff like that. And we would like do shows together. It was cool because you'd bring out a ton of different kids, but most of those people in all the bands were definitely like either aware of like hardcore or just like underground music in general and like DIY stuff.
Yeah.
So it wasn't weird versus bringing in like a metal, let's say a metal band that has like aspirations to be the next biggest thing that like takes themselves far too seriously and like has all these weird like wants and
Can you turn off all the lights? We got some floodlights here, and it's all like
oh,
some guy like doing the switches.
I remember we booked a show here. This was years ago at this point, but definitely a hardcore show. It was in a basement, and we threw this local metalcore band on because we're like, these kids are young, they seem nice. Maybe they'll bring out different people, and like they'll be into it. And I mean, Boise's like not the biggest city to where like this is like the right thing to do. And then this basement was literally like, if you could fit more than 40 people in there, I'd be surprised.
Okay.
And they brought in like floodlights, the little like the box stands that you would stand on, like
Yeah.
with the lights and shit inside it. They brought those. Like, where
Oh
can we put
fuck.
these? We're like, nowhere. Like, leave them in your car.
Yeah, in your trunk.
Like if you literally like, if your guitar player throws his guitar too high in the air, he's gonna hit a pipe, and you kind of just have to stand there and play. Like, it's not big enough otherwise.
Right. I think like that's a pretty funny point bringing it up. Just like I think hardcore bands and like that whole subgenre, whether it's like metalcore or whatever, I feel like we're used to playing in these very unconventional situations.
Oh yeah,
Where it's like, oh, we're playing under a bridge and it's like a generator show, or we're playing at like Program in California and there's like everybody, all the instruments have to like turn towards the drums because people are just getting so crazy. So I feel like no, I know there's metal bands that have like, oh, we'll play to whatever, but I think there are some bands that are like, like just dial it back a little bit. Like maybe leave
yeah,
the boxes at home for some shows. Maybe don't do your 7 guitar flips in a row if you don't have enough ceiling for that. For sure.
exactly.
Can I tell a basement show story? Just because,
Abs-
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I only want to say this because I think with COVID and this whole pandemic and the unfortunate reality that a lot of DIY spaces might not be readily available once this whole thing kind of makes a turn in the right direction as far as shows actually being socially acceptable or legal or however you want to spin it. But I think there might be an age of basement shows and people opening up their houses for some stuff to kind of make things happen. But I was playing in this band called Extract from Winnipeg, and we were playing a basement in Wilmar, Minnesota, so just outside of Minneapolis, and it, so it was like this really old barn house. So the basement was just like, it's kind of like when all that wood is like stacked up on to each other
Yeah.
and it's kind of rounded. And yeah, it was like probably like the size of this room and maybe double that, And so the band was playing, and I remember like people were going absolutely insane, and it was just like 100 degrees like Fahrenheit down there. And I remember like throwing my arm like during this one part of the song, and I smashed it against the wall, and I thought there was like nails and stuff sticking out, so I thought I had like jabbed my arm. So I'm like trying to play and check.
Tetanus.
Yeah. Unfortunately, didn't have to do anything like that, but that was an insane show. And I remember Hope, our vocalist, just set up like a GoPro, like literally in those like gutter like windows where they're like
Yeah.
only this big, and it's just peering down, and it's just it's just a crazy time. My bass player Joel punched like the like our drummer just played with like hi-hats and a crash ride, and he just like full on punched it in the middle of the set, and it was like super sick. He was very into it. And then he ended up doing that at a later show, and he punched it so hard that it fell off the stand. So our drummer's trying to like put it back on. So the age of the basement shows might make a return, and that might be the standard for a little while. So I just wanted to share that quick story. Going back to you though, you mentioned that you grew up in Alaska, and that's like a pretty removed part of the country. So I know that there might be a couple people listening or watching this podcast who might be in, call it, smaller scenes that are maybe, call it, in the middle of nowhere. They might not be in the West Coast or East Coast area. They might be a little bit more, call it, centralized, but to drive to a major scene venue, it's for sure a 8 to 12 hour journey. So how do you think how did you, like, I guess, stick with just being involved in hardcore when it, obviously I think the times we're in now where, you can buy shit online and like stream things and have the accessibility is there, but just as far as having that, that pride of where you're from, how did that just kind of keep going for you versus like, oh, I'm from this tiny little town in Alaska, like what difference am I going to make to the scene?
I think one thing that helped, honestly, was growing up there. Unless you're into like hunting and fishing, and I would say camping, but it's so cold there half the time, like you're not going camping. Like, unless you're into like outdoor, like snowboarding, skiing, like hiking, stuff like that. Unless you're into like outdoor sports, there really isn't a whole lot to do. And being that it's dark and it's so cold most of the year, during the summer it's bright all the time, which summers are actually like kind of fun, but you have to like make your own fun. And just anyone that's grown up in a small town like definitely understands that like issue of like, we would just be like, oh, we're gonna go walk to the grocery store, walk around the grocery store, then walk back home. Like that's what we're gonna do. So then once I found like hardcore and like that whole thing, I just like definitely immersed myself in it and like just really dove in. Like Alaska, not as much as Alaska, but Anchorage is a big like military town.
Okay.
So you have a lot of transplants from the lower 48, and almost anyone that I met that knew about hardcore was from somewhere else. And to where a lot of the people that I ended up having like a close friendship with that were like my group of friends were from like Denver or Detroit or North Carolina. And this one kid specifically had literally like terabytes of hardcore.
Interesting.
And we would just go over to his house and he would just, it was crazy is he was younger than all of us. And he would just like check all these bands out, listen to all this. And I think one thing that just helped was like there was so much of it that, and at the time like I was at an age where I just wanted like more and more and more, like I wasn't getting burnt out on like discovering more and more bands and things like that, to where that in itself was like very like time consuming / like interesting. And I would just really dive in and try to like check all of it out. And if like back then you'd buy CDs, or I mean you could buy records too, but I bought CDs, and looking through the thank you list and then seeing if he had that on in his hard drive, or if I could find like a Blogspot download or an MP3 or whatever. So where just that discovery phase really helped me like stick with it. Being that there wasn't a whole lot to do, starting a band and just like practicing, that kept me involved. Booking shows, I started booking local shows. That was really fun. The fact that people were like, oh, this is really cool, you should keep doing this, like these shows are cool, motivated me to keep doing it and things like that. And no, being like in a town where there isn't a whole lot to do, finding something that you like definitely like just keeps you busy. And then I was definitely always the type of person that I liked being different, and it was something that, like, I guess fueled me in a way, and, like, when I would see, like, all these kids at school, like, with, I don't know, just we'll say shitty, like, mall metal
Yeah.
shirts
Yeah.
and things like that, I'm like, "Yeah, I guess that's cool." It's honestly, like, pretty soft, like, normal music, like, there's nothing super crazy about it, whereas I'm into these bands, and they actually have shit to say, and it's cool, and it's, like, something much more special, and not everyone knows about it. Like, that just got me stoked. And I don't know, I mean, um, I think traveling for shows definitely helped, and it kind of, like, made it stick a little harder. Me and a bunch of my friends flew down to the last Champion show for that whole weekend in Seattle, and that kind of cemented, like, hardcore is sick, like, yeah, shows in Alaska are, like, they're fun, like, but even then, we felt very out of place because 'cause we'd be getting in fights every weekend and things like that,
Right.
whereas going to, like, quote unquote real scene and seeing what hardcore shows are like, real hardcore shows are like, and like just being able to get along with everyone, and like seeing everyone moshing and there not being any like real problems and things like that, it further cemented like, yo, this is sick. I should definitely stay involved with this. And I know that I'm not gonna live in Alaska forever.
Mm.
And also the internet, I'll just throw like, as like, especially now, as like dumb as like hardcore Twitter or whatever, like as it is, the internet can be very cool and help you connect with a lot of people you wouldn't otherwise. And living in a very isolated, remote place like Alaska, that definitely helped. Like, just like either getting on like back then, like getting on MySpace or getting on like the B9 board and things like that, and like forums and just like fucking around and like talking shit, and then talking with other people about music
Yeah.
and things like that. Like, I don't know. I would say to anyone in a small area, like, use the internet in a cool way. Don't get sucked into like the nightmare vortex that it can be, but use it for cool stuff like talking with music, talking about hardcore, discovering new bands, watching. I mean, it was crazy back then. They didn't like, there was YouTube, but it wasn't like it is now. Like,
Right.
between like y'all and Hate 56 and just like all the specific channels literally around documenting shows outside of random people filming sets and things like that. Like, I wish there was that kind of stuff back then, just so I could have like, I was having to buy DVDs of like Hellfest and like
Right.
Indecision Records DVDs and crap like that back then.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, so hopefully I can hit on all the points. But off of the last thing you said, it's like, yeah, like the amount of times, like if I had a nickel for every time that someone was like, yeah, I don't know, like if you filming or people filming shows in general has like affected people not to go to shows, and then like literally in the same, not in the same breath, but like 5 minutes later been like retelling the stories of a certain show, and they're like, yeah, I would love to if you had filmed that. So I
Well,
think
that's
that,
the
I think it's
sorry, go
like,
on.
no, it's all good. I just think it's just ironic that people just want to point fingers but don't want to point out any of the other reasons why someone might not be into hardcore. And it might not even be something like, "Oh, I have a problem with this person in this band," or I like it could just be like, "I had a kid and I don't have time to like, like to go to shows all the time."
Yeah,
Like, like I have plenty of people in my life where I used to play in bands with them, and they have 3 kids now, or they just went in a different direction. And I think, you know, like hardcore, I don't know, it's so strange. Like for me, I don't really see an end date. I don't think like, oh, I'll be like checked out by this, or like this is, my breaking point. It's like I love this music and I love this community, and I think you're right that the internet has cemented that or galvanized it in a certain way. Like I don't really think about like connecting with so here's a little thing. My school that I graduated from, they have like a 10-year anniversary, and that has been something that's been on my mind, like and it's coming up on the 10 years since I've been out of high school. And I was like, I don't even have any interest in going to that because I know that I have like zero in common with most of the people there. Like, I was definitely listening to maybe more of that mall metal kind of stuff we were mentioning around the time of being in high school. But now it's like, I'm going to go and everyone's going to be like flexing their like PhDs. And I'm like, yeah, I like to film bands.
That's
And,
so
you know, like,
I one of my best friends from high school sent me a couple months ago. They created like a big anniversary thing for my high school on Facebook, but it's not even like the class you graduated in. It's literally everyone that went to this high school. We're planning a gigantic trip to Vegas. And like I was
that
just
sounds
like
horrible in so many
I was like,
ways.
"Oh, like she texted me and was like, "You got to check out. I'm going to send you the invite. Like this group is a nightmare. Like it's just like she's like it's just so like she's like I feel bad because a lot like looking at some of the posts you can tell some of these people like never like high school was like such a big deal to them,
Right.
and then other
It
people
was
where it's
their
like
apex.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then other people where it's like this probably wouldn't be popping off as much if we weren't like in quarantine and stuff, but I just like going in there and like fucking with people, not in like mean ways, but just like posting really stupid things and like seeing people that take it so seriously get so bent out of shape. And I'm just like, yo, who cares? Like,
Right.
first of all, most people in there don't know each other. So I'm like, why are you planning this huge trip? Like,
Yeah. And
but
are they planning it during this whole pandemic as well?
I mean, initially they were, and people were kind of like, I don't know if that's actually like feasible. And they're like, okay, well, we'll do it next year. And I'm like, you're still being pretty optimistic that this
Yeah.
is going to be something that's going to happen next year.
Right.
But no, yeah, I mean, one thing I think hardcore, going back to what you're saying, like, oh, you've been in bands with people and like now they have kids and kind of just like have veered off in different directions. Like, I wish that I could go back and tell myself, don't get mad about that kind of shit, and like don't almost ostracize people for like not even moving on, but just like having things outside of hardcore, or like, oh, like I'm not gonna go to this show, but I'm gonna go to that show. And like I used to get so pissy about that. I'm like, no, you have to go to every show. And like if you don't go to these shows, like you're not supporting the scene, like you don't give a shit. Like if you don't want to support it all the way, like fuck off. Like don't come, like so stupid. And I kind of think that people, I think if you really, really truly like hardcore, love hardcore, whatever, I think there's varying degrees of how you support it as you get older, and that's totally fine. Like a YouTube channel like yours or like Sunny's, I think that's super great, especially for people that can't go to every show but still want to like keep up with what's going on and see.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way. Same with like podcasts and things like that. Like I have friends here that when I moved here, they were at every single show, and now I'll see them if Terror plays, and
Right.
they're just like, I don't have time to go to every show, so I'm gonna go to the shows of bands that I really like, and they're still down to check out new music and stuff, but it's just like I can't financially, time wise, I can't go to every show.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go to the ones that make the most sense for me.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a few people listening who may. I'm thinking of my friend Andrew. I interviewed him, so he was kind of an OG Calgary hardcore guy, but now he lives in this tiny little town in Manitoba with his partner and her kids, and you know he doesn't have really that, like, not to say that there's like tons of shows happening or anything right now, but like the access in a smaller setting is not there, so you either have to make a choice. Am I going to drive 3 hours for every show or opportunity to do something, or can I still contribute and be a part of the community in other ways? And I don't think that there's this gavel being thrown as far as like, how many benefit shirts did you buy during this time? Like how
Yeah.
much vinyl do you own? Like I think people are supporting it in a variety of ways, and it's just that your actions speak louder than it. I think I get a little like when like there's people who are so like pro, like, oh, you have to do this, like you have to support your local scene and do this, and then I only see them at like the shows that their band is playing, and I'm like,
Oh,
that's a little funky in my opinion.
no, it's 100. Like, if you're so loud and vocal and like just like attention grabbing and just so in your face about like hardcore and things like that, and then you're literally never at shows or only the shows that you're playing, you're a dork. Otherwise, it's totally fine. Like,
Right.
um,
Dork needs to
our
be more of a term that we use in our vocabulary. It's been a while since I've heard dork.
well, like our bassist Ralph, like he doesn't like he works a lot. He's got a kid. He'll go to shows that we play. He'll go to like if it's a really big show of a band that he really likes, he'll go. Otherwise, he's just like, I can't make it to every show. Like, it is what it is. But he's also not like ever like telling about that. He's just like very quiet and he's kind of like, I'll go to when I can. Like, I have adult responsibilities that like kind of take precedent over like going to the show. And that's fine. But then if you see people that are just like constantly posting, and it's usually the ones that complain too, and no one goes to their shows, and then they're not going to shows themselves.
Yeah.
I've noticed, or at least here, I've noticed that. Like, it's just interesting.
So obviously, we've been chatting a lot, but obviously we haven't really touched much on Rejection Pact. But can you just tell me, like, I feel like most of the people tuning in know about the band and probably like most of the origins about that. I know that you guys did a cover kind of during this quarantine. And I think when we originally recorded this podcast, it was just before that, so you were like teasing it. But now it's out. It's a Go It Alone cover. Do you want to give me some of the details around the idea of how that came together?
So before we did that Western Canada tour last summer, Charlie and I were like, yo, we should cover Go It Alone. They're sick, big influence on our band, and it'd be cool just to cover a Canadian band while playing Canada. Maybe like they're kind of an older band, not like old, but older at this point to where we're like, we don't know how well that'll go over per se, but maybe some people will be into it. It'll be cool. And obviously when we played Vancouver, it went off. When we played Kelowna, it went off. When we played Seattle, it went off. So that was cool. But we actually recorded that back in like October of last year. Okay. Because our plan was we redid all the guitars from our demo. Since we have 2 guitar players now, we just went back. And Charlie's like, oh, we can make the guitar sound better anyway. To where we redid guitars, and then we were gonna put out our demo because we ran out of all the initial like pressings or whatever we had made of it. So we were gonna reissue the demo with the cover on it and use that for like when we were on tour. And we're like, oh, this will be just something cool to have, like a tape. Like maybe we'll sell them. And then once shows kind of were not happening, we were just sitting on this cover, and then our label at the time was like, oh, we're putting out a comp to raise money for people affected by COVID. Right. So we used that.
Shout out to Safe Inside.
And then Life Haunt Records hit us up and we're like, yo, fucking love Go It Alone. Like, this is so cool. Like, we really want to could we put this out as a single? Oh, okay. And they were like, we like literally like, we'll cover everything. Like, we just really want to put this out. Like, Go It Alone is like one of my favorite bands. The cover sounds great. We can donate the money to whatever you guys want. It just let us know. And then we hit the label up and we're just like, yo, do you care if we put this out through someone else? And they're like, yeah, it's for a good cause. Go for it. Like, that's awesome. Yeah. So then we figured that out. I think we only did they did like 20 because it's all like hand cut. Soup like it looked fucking tight. Like I was like we were all definitely like blown away with how like cool it looked. And then we just basically sold that off, donated all the money to Black Lives Matter, and put that out. I think last month.
Yeah.
I think last month when I like actually like mailed them to everyone. But yeah, no, I mean we just love Go It Alone. Like everyone in the band at like varying degrees, but I think especially for Charlie and I, that's like a super big influence on us. Like I think Mark's like an incredible vocalist and lyricist, and every band he's done has been sick. I think for like that style of hardcore, they did it the best out of everyone, and that's who like through varying degrees, like bands from that scene, like some of them aren't quite as appealing as they used to be, or like are definitely a time and place thing. Whereas with them, I can put it on anytime and just like definitely like get super pumped.
Yeah.
And they're probably one of the, if they ever did a reunion, I don't think they ever will, but if they ever did, no matter where it is, would 100% go immediately.
Yeah, that's another Canadian band that I would love to capture a set of. I remember specifically when I moved to Calgary and I was like learning about some of the more local bands kind of prior, a few years back. Act Fast was like a big one. I literally remember having coffee with a friend and he was like showing me photos of their last show, and it was at the Legion, and that was like the same place 11 years later that they did their reunion at Boudreaux, and I got to film it, and I was like, this is a band I never thought I'd be able to capture a reunion set of. So Go It Alone would be sick. They're definitely on my list, as well as Means, and I feel like I'm just trying to speak it into existence, because if either of those things happen, I'm literally going to just play this clip, the day that they announce it. So
my
old
roommates are obsessed with Means.
Yeah.
Like just like that style of like, we'll just say like Shai Hulud, like Misery Signals style. Like
yeah, more like not like actually thought out like hardcore riffage, not just like caveman chugging, so to speak.
Like very like pretty and melodic and almost like atmospheric. Like have you checked out that new Misery Signals record?
I've listened to maybe the first 3 songs on it. It's definitely mean sounding. That release day for them was the same day that Year of the Knife came out, and so I was like, 2 heavy hitters going back to back. So I have some catch up to do for sure.
I haven't listened to the Year of the Knife yet, but I listened to the first song and pretty good.
Yeah, it is very good. Shout out to both of those bands. You alluded to this just a little bit earlier, Dev, but like hardcore overall, I think the thing that really resonates with a lot of people is that the subject matter of what is talked about lyrically is just a step beyond a lot of other styles of music. There's I would say like metal is maybe the second in line to that, but I feel like hardcore, there's everything from personal self-reflection to like politically charged lyrics. So what is your take on that, and how do you kind of match that with what you write for Rejection Pact material?
I definitely think that one thing I think that's like cool about hardcore lyrics is I feel like a lot of the times it's just very straightforward. Like I like more like metaphorical stuff, or like trying to think of a way to word it.
Like a
We'll just
concept
say
album kind of,
yeah,
in a sense, yeah.
or even just like smart, like well thought. Like I like all that stuff, or even stuff that's like very vague that you can interpret it however you want. That's cool because then you can reach a lot of people. But one thing I really like about a lot of hardcore lyrics, and obviously this isn't all lyrics in hardcore, but I like that there's such a straightforwardness to it. I think that sometimes for some people it can be kind of off-putting of like reading lyrics and being like, I don't really get it, or I don't know exactly what they're trying to go for. whereas with hardcore, a lot of it's pretty face value. And I think that that's one reason why it connects with a lot of people is that, oh, this person is saying what I'm thinking, or oh, this person feels the same way I do. Cool, I'm not alone in that feeling or whatever. I also think that with lyrics, like you're saying, where sometimes it's super personable to where it's a way to just get shit off your chest. And I think with other times it's a way to like connect if you feel alone. Like, I mean, anytime, like, we'll use like a current band, like when people are singing along at like a Magnitude show, like that's fucking crazy. And it's like a very cohesive, like we're all in this, whatever, to where that can be a very empowering feeling. And if you're someone that feels very isolated or very like, I don't connect with a lot of people, whereas when I'm here, I have that sense of community and I connect with everyone, or not even everyone, but just like, even just being in a place where it's like, I don't fucking like you, I don't like you, I don't like you in this room. But when this band's playing, like all that shit doesn't really matter. And we're all like piling on top of each other and singing along. Like that's fucking crazy and that's cool.
Yeah. No,
And
yeah, I think that's an actually well thought point. Just like the fact that, you know, I've always struggled with this is that, you know, everyone's in a different place in their lives in the community of hardcore. Like it's not like everyone needs to necessarily be like best friends, and you know, you could be like, yo, what's up, and have mutual respect, but you don't have to be like, I fucks with you on every level. But there is that sense where, you know, certain lyrics that apply to both of those people individually can kind of bring them together in a sense, for sure.
it's, I mean, just going off that a little bit, like like it's weird to me when people get so bummed out, like, oh, so and so doesn't like me at shows or whatever. I'm just like, who cares? Like, does everyone like get along and be civil with each other and be like quote unquote adults? But like, you don't have to be friends with everyone, and that's totally fine. Like, I don't like everyone at shows. I guarantee not everyone at shows likes me, and that's totally fine. Like, you can't please everyone. Just like everyone just get along, because if everyone just gets along, shows are just better. And like, imagine being like a new person going to a show and just there being that awkward tension and like beef. Like that's so dumb and like off-putting. And that wouldn't make me want to go back to shows if it's like, oh, this feels like a stupid high school dance. Like I'm good. But going back to lyrics, at least for me, when it comes to writing stuff, I just try to write things that like I'm pissed off a lot of the time, and I try not to like outwardly put out negative energy like I used to. Like I just try not to do that anymore. I don't think that like helps anything, and it's just kind of like dumb.
Yeah.
To where for me, I'm very mad about a lot of political things or things from either like a weird moral level or just like societal level, to where that's a way for me to like talk about it
Yeah.
outside of like constantly complaining or like, yo, this sucks, or you see what so and so did, that's so dumb, like why would someone do that, like, or these policies are so fucked, to where it's just a way for me to, I guess, like vent about that. And then at the same time hope that if people are feeling just as frustrated as I am or as we are as a band, that there's that sense of community connectivity through it. I mean, cool, a straight white dude complaining about stuff, like I'm not oppressed by any means. And but I think that it's important that if you have like that platform to like speak out and be like, yo, this isn't fucking okay, like these are things that are going on, like that's wrong. Like I guess this year especially, I've been trying to like read a lot more and like I guess better educate myself and like listen to like being more involved at like a communal level and just trying to like hear other people's stories and their perspectives and things like that. And I guess trying to bring that more to like the lyrics that we're writing for the new stuff is just like not being like patronizing and like, oh, you're so dumb. Like, how come you don't know this?
Yeah.
But just like just like these are things that you should be thinking about. These are things that you should be asking yourself. Like these are things that like you should be asking other people. Things like that. Like I think a lot of people I mean, okay, I'm sure you see it too. I mean, it'd be hard not to see it, but like when people will be like, if you don't think this way, like if you're this, or this, just unfriend me and delete me. Like I don't have time for this. Like that's cool, but also like not everyone has that luxury of like being able to just disconnect from that it, right off. Whereas I'm like, at least myself, and I'm trying to like, people are so fucking nuanced and complicated, and that a lot of people that like either have fucked up viewpoints or like will say and do like malicious, not even malicious, but just like, I guess, stupid things. Like, I don't think a lot of people are necessarily bad people. It's just like they either don't know or they've never had anyone call them out on it. And not even in like an aggressive way, but just be like asking them questions of like, why do you feel this way? Like, why do you think that like just things like that. And to where I'm just getting lost in my ramblings at this point. But
That's all good.
just with lyrics, I guess I'm just gonna dial it back.
Hard
Just trying to
transition.
like ask a lot of questions and get people thinking, and almost like I would love for people to like think about stuff and then like have the courage, I guess, to like call out their like racist uncle or aunt, but not in like a hey, fuck you, you're an idiot, but just like a hey, I heard you say this or you said this, like why do you think that's okay to say that? Or like why did you feel the need to say that? Like what do you have to gain by saying this? And just getting in a dialogue with them, because I think that a lot of people, if you've learned stupid things, like you can unlearn them. It's just going to take a while. And I think sometimes people have this immediate need to like want them to immediately change, and that'd be great, but it's not easy.
Very unrealistic, though, for sure.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, I mean, like, so my mom is definitely like a hippie and very like left leaning. But I remember a couple years ago, she was like, I just all like the term Black Lives Matter just seemed it I don't get it. Like it just seems like off-putting to people, and like people might take it the wrong way, and like I don't know, like, and I was like, now you're being dumb. And like I was just very like, no, shut up, and like explaining it to her, and she's like, well, and I'm like, you sound, and like just like getting mad and like almost like shutting it off. But then since then I've just kind of kept harping on her about it and like showing her stuff and trying to like, oh, you should read this article, or oh, go listen to this interview with this person. And just like over time, like sprinkling stuff in here and there. And then like a couple months ago, she like posted this big thing on Facebook about how like saying all lives matter is wrong, and how Black Lives Matter actually means this, and how like really think about it from this perspective, and how it actually makes a lot of sense, and how it's not saying that other lives don't matter. It's just like, oh well, if you look at like, like statistics and things like that, like blah blah blah. So I'm like, okay, it got through to her.
Yeah.
Like it took a while,
Yeah,
but it
it
did.
wasn't overnight. Yeah.
To where I think if people are wanting, because I mean, you're not gonna get, if you start beefing with some random person on a Facebook thread or a Twitter thread like that doesn't know you, you're not gonna fucking get through them. There's no way. Like
Yeah,
that.
99.9% of the time it's
Yeah,
going to just be, well, you're this, and just back and forth and no real change. And like, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that there is a lot of people that you know, lazily will point to other activists who are like, oh, well, they're posting lots of stuff about them, and then they're, you know, sharing this like stuff, and then I see those people be like, I literally can't handle the amount of messages that I'm getting, and I have to, you know, take a week off of Instagram or whatever. So I think overall, we as, you know, like both you and I are straight white males. I think we and a lot of the other people listening need to check that and make sure that we're doing our part in our own families and communities versus just passing the buck in that sense.
Exactly. And I mean, like, I try to tell some of my relatives, I'm just like, I'm frustrated, but I'm not mad at you. And like, don't think that like I have said fucked up things. I've like thought like it's literally ingrained in society, and you have to like try to unlearn that kind of shit. And it's not something where it's like a one and done thing. You have to like always be doing it. And I think that's one reason why a lot of people get so frustrated is like, we'll say conservative relatives of mine will think, oh, well, like the civil rights movement and like everything's fine now. And it's like, actually, no, like not at all.
Right.
But, and I'm not like, a lot of people just get like, I mean, about anything, if you get caught out on something, a normal immediate human reaction is to be defensive.
Right.
Whereas like, if you've done something to someone or said something that offended them or upset them, you should. And I mean, as I'm saying this, like I'm a very defensive person, like, but you should welcome that feedback. That's what you should want, so you don't do that again, or at least gives you something to think about of being like, oh, okay, well they said this. Well, let me take a step back and look at what did I say or what did I do. And I think that's hard with a lot of people with like dealing with like their relatives, for example, is they're immediately going to be defensive if like you're attacking them. To where I try to like put that in perspective of like, hey, like I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I've never like said or done things that were wrong or like, but I'm trying to learn and be better. And like I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I think that you could be better as well. Like, let's discuss this. And if they like push back on you, like you can't. I don't think it's like you can't just give up if you're actually wanting to like get them to change. And I think that that's one of the nice things you have with like family or friends is you have that like, I mean, in theory, you should have that built-in trust and built-in kind of like respect that you can have these like difficult conversations. And again, I think everyone just needs to do what they're comfortable with. Like obviously mental health is super important. And like if you're doing this and you're constantly getting berated and like shut down and like, made to feel like shit and things like that, like, yeah, maybe you need to take a step back then and be like, okay, like we'll revisit this at a later date, and that's okay. Um, I mean, we'll jump back to the lyrics thing. Our lyrics on the new stuff we're writing is much. I feel like our other stuff was political, but I feel like the new stuff, like, there's just so much shit that's like going on in 2020. I mean, some of the stuff it's old news, but there's a lot more stuff because there's so much new shit happening week to week.
Yeah.
That I definitely don't have writer's block at all. And
it's gonna be like a double LP. Like it's gonna be 2 LPs worth.
We're getting ready to start demo tracking.
Okay, cool.
This month, or supposed to start. Like, we're gonna have a Zoom chat this week, I think, with everyone to kind of like get that like hammered out. Like, okay, what do we actually want to do? But Charlie and I have been discussing this a lot lately, and our plan is to try to get the whole record demo tracked this month, which should be 12 songs.
Sick.
And then, maybe we cut a couple, maybe we don't. But the plan is to demo track everything as if we were gonna be almost put it out ourselves. Like we want it to sound good, or at least good enough, and then sit on it for like a month or whatever. Just kind of listen to it, figure out is there anything that we want to change on it. Like I think that'll be a good time to figure out we'll say layers of guitar tracks, you know, and like adding cool little leads and like shit like that. And then hopefully we're gonna go record with Ryan Morgan at Misery Signals because he lives here.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
Go record everything with him, and then I don't know if I'm gonna do vocals. I wanted to do vocals with Charlie because we have a studio at our practice spot.
Yeah.
Just because I'm gonna be rusty as fuck, and we don't have like a time crunch or anything because we're in a pandemic to where I would like to take my time and have the vocals be as good as possible. And being that we're not like doing other stuff, it's not like I haven't sang on any of these songs for the new record like at all, like never once. To where it's going to be a lot of like kind of touch and go, like learning it as we're recording, kind of, you know, to where we just want it to sound as good as possible, to where I don't want to be rushed and like, oh, we paid X amount of money for the studio, like we need to get your vocal parts done as quick as possible, like
Right.
to where
more flexibility will just promote better execution for you for sure.
exactly. To where I think he was saying, I mean, this is purely just like him and I speculating, but he's like, oh, it'd be really cool if like maybe I can have Ryan come to our studio and just kind of help me make sure that like we get the best takes out of you, but like we're not necessarily confined to like a time constraint of we've paid X number of hours. So I think our last record sounds good. I really like it, but we want this one just to sound better. And Charlie, Hunter, and Ralph in the band have all recorded with Ryan with other bands. And Charlie and I's old band recorded with Ryan, so we're all boys. It'll be fun, and it'll just sound better. It'll sound more like a, I guess, professional recording.
Right.
So that'll be fun.
Very excited for new Rejection Pack. I've spun the latest release front to back a handful of times, so I'm itching for new music from you guys. Dev, we're kind of at the tail end of the podcast here, and you know how I like to end these is just a favorite mosh story. So anything off the top of your mind that we can send everyone home with?
I think of a good mosh pit story. Okay, we'll keep it very Canadian.
Okay. I appreciate the Maddie Matheson. I don't know if that was an intentional plug, but
so we were it was Sound and Fury in 2007. It was at the Alpine. It was like I don't think it's even a venue anymore, but it was like a skate park / venue. Go to Lone was playing, and on the side of the stage there is like basically two big old stacks of monitors. And I remember I climbed up on the monitor on one of the sides, head walked off to the middle of the stage, because this was back when head walking people still did it.
Yeah.
I head walked till the middle of the stage, and it was right during the chorus. I think of A Constant Refrain. I think that song. And Mark came down, and I was like, pulled him up and like sang like the whole chorus, did that, and then like either fell through or then dove back off. But that was, I remember after that, like after the set ended, I was just like, oh man, I can't wait till the live set of this. Like that's gonna look so sick. That'll be great.
Yeah.
And then they never released the DVD for that year.
No.
They have all the footage, like on the Sound and Fury YouTube account. They have some sets from that year, but that one still has not seen the light of day.
Oh.
And I hope it does, because I know they have it, because I've talked to them about it. I'm like, yeah, we have it. Like, but yeah, Canada hardcore is very sick.
Yeah, it'll get the blood flowing in a different kind of way. It's purely maple syrup and mosh. Well, Dev, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and jamming with me. Definitely go follow Rejection Pact. Go listen to all their releases. I'll be looking forward to all the new stuff. Hopefully, do you have a date that that is going to be out by, or is that still up in the air?
We want to have it like recorded. We basically want to have the finished product done by the end of the year. I think because we don't want to release it until we can tour again.
Yeah.
So I talked with the label last week, and it's almost like by that point we should, like, in theory, at some point next year, you could kind of have a general idea of like when shows should be happening again, so we can maybe get it like taken to press like a couple months before.
Yeah.
Because we want these songs to be new. We don't want them to be forgotten by the time we're playing shows.
Yeah.
So we want to have it all. We want to have it done and just basically like sitting on it until we need to put it out. We'll probably put out a flexi before then of new stuff, just to like promote the new record. Like 2 or 3 songs. Like, I really want to record just one of our intros that we would play on tour, and then just put that with a couple new songs. But it should be done by the end of the year. Got to figure out layout, artwork, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, Rejection Pact has been a huge supporter of Scoped, and I'm a huge fan of what you guys are doing as far as band-wise, community-wise. So I 100%, if you haven't heard of the band, go check them out. Go support them. Go follow Dev. And thanks for coming on the podcast.